Hi friends, welcome to GMK tutorials. Now, in this digital system design series and the digital logic design series, we are going to discussing one of the most important point topic that is nothing but triggering in flip-flops. So flip-flops is one of the basic building blocks for counters and registers. In that flip-flops, we are using some clock signals. So how flip-flops is going to be working, when it is going to be working, that kind of the questions can be answered this concept. Okay, so let us see here. So triggering means generally we know that in the previous class what is meant by clock, right? So previously we discussed a clock is nothing but it is a rectangular signal or it is a periodic signal, right? So it is a periodic signal. So this is called as a rising, this is called as falling edges of the flip flops. Okay, so already discussed this one. Okay, it is a rising edge, it is nothing but a falling edge. Okay, so here triggering means that a momentary change in the input signal, the state of the flip-flop is switched. Okay, a momentary change in the so triggering means that momentary change in the input, okay, is called trigger, is called triggering. Okay, which changes the which changes the state of the flipper, which changes the state of the flip flop. Okay, which changes the state of the flip flop. So this momentary change from it may be change from change from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. So 1 to 0 to 1 means that it's a rising. Okay, it is nothing but falling. Okay, this is generally called as a triggering. Okay, based on the input trigger, that means it may be changing from momentary change in the input signal is called as a trigger. There are two types of uh, which flip-flops can be triggered. Flip-flops can be changed for two types. So that is nothing but edge trigger, and the second one is nothing but a pulse trigger. Okay, so edge trigger one is nothing but uh, types types in edge triggered types. So, okay, one is nothing but edge trigger, and the second one is nothing but a level or pulse trigger. Okay, level triggering, or else we can also call as a pulse triggering. Okay, so here edge trigger means that the flip flop is only response for edge of the clock signal. Okay, that is nothing but whether it is a transition from 0 to 1 or it may be 1 to 0. When the triggering occurs on positive going edge of the clock is called as a positive edge triggering. Okay, so let us see here. Okay, so let us see here. Edge triggering means that edge triggered Okay, edge trigger flip-flops means that the flip-flops are response to the only during the clock transition. Here flip-flops are edge triggering flip-flops means that here flip-flops are response to the response to the only clock pulse transition, only clock pulse transition. Okay, only clock pulse transition from one reference to, it may be 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. So this is generally called as a edge triggering. Suppose if you are taking one more some of the points like if the flip-flop responds to positive edge positive edge of the clock is called as positive edge triggering, is called as positive edge triggering. Okay, so if negative edge changes the state of flip-flop is called negative edge triggering. Okay, these are the, so one more classification, other classification is there, that is nothing but pulse triggering. Okay, that is nothing but pulse triggering. So pulse triggering means that here data are entered into the flip-flop on the rising edge of the clock. Here input is provided at the rising edge of the clock. Okay, so data is provided at the rising edge of the clock of the rising edge of the clock, but output does not reflect the input. No, but output does not reflect the output does not reflect the reflects to the output does not reflects to the input until the falling edge of the clock, falling edge of the, so this is called as a pulse triggering. Okay na, so this is nothing but what is meant by triggering. Triggering is nothing but triggering అంటే ఏం చెప్తామండి. So triggering means a momentary change in the clock. It may be 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. That is generally called as a triggering. based on the positive and negative of the clock pulses. If the triggering happens, that is nothing but edge triggering. One more classification is nothing but pulse triggering. In the pulse triggering, input is applied at the rising edge of the clock, but it does not produce the output until the negative edge of the clock is present. So this is generally called as a pulse triggering. Okay, so this edge triggering flip flop changes the state in the synchronization with the clock pulse, either the positive or negative, and it is also useful in the designing of the synchronous sequential circuits where all changes in the circuit output occurs in a synchronization with the clock signal. Okay, so thank you for watching GMK tutorial. In the next class, we will see what is meant by edge triggered SR flip flop. Okay, na? So thank you for support.